Good morning, everybody. Dungeons & Dragons Online's 16th anniversary brings free races and classes to the table. That's right. Of your races, Dragonborn, Drow, Gnome, Half-Elf, Half-Orc, Tiefling, and Wood Elf are now all free to play. But not only that, the classes Druid, Monk, and Warlock are also free to play, which means that if you don't have any of those things, you can now just start playing them right away. And if you're somebody who has thought about playing Dungeons & Dragons Online, but maybe your favorite character from pen and paper couldn't have been played for free, well, now it can, since Tiefling Warlock is now on the table and something you can do, which you couldn't do for free before. So to celebrate this fantastic release, I've decided to put together some beginner-friendly character builds of the Druid, Monk, and Warlock classes so that if you're getting started right now, you'll be able to play a competent and strong build well suited for Dungeons & Dragons Online's experience. The builds are Gnome, Bear, Druid, Tiefling, Warlock, and Wood Elf, Staff, Monk. If these things sound interesting to you, then check the chapters of this video, little breakdowns below, and you'll be able to go to the section that interests you the most. So for starters, let's talk about Gnome, Bear, Druid. Now, Druid is an amazing class that can be a spellcaster, you can be a healer, you can be a crowd control type of character, you can turn into a wolf, you can turn into a bear, you can do a lot of things. And in this case, I decided to go with Bear Druid as the beginner basic character because Druid is just so incredibly strong at keeping itself alive, and Bear Druid does that even better than your average druid. Super tanky, but also with fantastic quality of life, getting full area of effect on all of its attacks while in bear form, and having a substantially high amount of outgoing damage thanks to its good spell selection when it comes to different types of bear spells like Maul, Shred, and Roar, and a bunch of really awesome, wicked, and cool abilities like the Bear Charge and Lightning Strikes the Mountain, dealing area of effect lightning damage and also protecting you from enemy magic. I decided to go with Gnome Bear in this case, because gnomes are able to acquire a dragon mark, which gives you protection from different types of spells, most specifically the Magic Missile spell. This spell doesn't seem that dangerous, but if you push the difficulty even a little bit, you start to encounter champion-type monsters, which can have additional effects added to all of their spells. And if you have a monster that deals extra fire damage on their spells, sure, extra fire damage on a fireball sounds like it could hurt. But when it's Magic Missile, well, that Magic Missile hits you 5 times, and that added fire damage turns to instant incineratory death. As a result, getting full immunity to Magic Missiles by being a gnome makes this process super easy. Plus, you get to be a tiny little bear and run around. This character is extremely strong and carried me to victory during Dungeons & Dragons Online's 3rd hardcore season. So if you are looking forward to playing a druid, then get started with the Gnomish Bear Druid today, and follow my build I'm going to show you right now. Druid is the first class I want to showcase today, specifically because Bear Druid is versatile and strong, and what better way to do it than with Gnome, one of the brand new races available as free to play for Dungeons & Dragons Online. Now, Gnome isn't going to be a lot of people's first pick, but the main reason that I'm taking it is because it gives you a special ability, which is the Dragon Mark of Scribing, which allows you to cast Shield, and it protects you from a lot of different dangerous magics like Magic Missile. Now, if you're familiar with pen and paper Dungeons & Dragons, you wouldn't think that Magic Missile is that important to protect yourself from, but in Dungeons & Dragons Online, a lot of characters can carry riding effects, so they might be a special champion-type monster that adds additional damage on all of their attacks. When that is the case, usually if a monster melees you or hits you with a fireball, you get hit 1 time, but a Magic Missile can make you get hit like 5 times in a row. What if they cast 2 magic missiles in a row? When they've taken 10 hits of this extra effect, and it is extremely lethal, surprisingly. So Gnome kind of skips all that. Plus, you get to be a little tiny bear, which is very fun. So, how exactly do you build this character? First, not that much strength, not that much con, not that much wisdom. Your character kind of spreads their points really thin, but it's okay because Bear makes up for it with some of their raging effects and abilities they get later on. Now, this is a pure druid, and your skills go into concentration, heal, intimidate, and spot. Spot's for seeing monsters. Intimidate is for getting aggro on monsters because you're like really strong and tough and you can hold aggro over your allies, or if you're just playing by yourself, it's still nice to keep them off of your hirelings or other companions you have or your pet wolf. Heal, because it gives you more healing ability, and concentration because you may not have or monsters will hit you while you're casting spells sometimes in combat, and it prevents you from losing your spells. Now, as far as your actual feats go, as I said, you take the Dragon Mark of Scribing and the Dire Bear form as soon as possible, with the other Druid forms just kind of filling in as stand-ins. And then you take Natural Fighting. Natural Fighting is a combat style, as there are multiple different combat styles in this game, and it is the specific Druid combat style. In Bear form, it gives you Strike Through, which lets you hit multiple monsters. So whenever you swipe with your Bear, you're actually going to hit all of the monsters in front of you, or at least a percentage of them, as opposed to just one, which is great. It just means you can kind of claw your way through. This character is also designed to use shields and gets Tower Shield proficiency, allowing you to use both a Scimitar and a Tower Shield, which is the general way you want to do it. Although it's Scimitar and regular shield until you get to 15, where you get Tower Shield proficiency, and you can sub that in for some extra defense. You also pick up Quicken Spell later, as your later level spells, the higher level spells, take longer to cast. So by the time you're level 18, you have all the Druid spells, so you can get your heals and your Raise Dead and that sort of effects really quickly off in combat. And then moving into the epics, almost everything in here is passive that just gives you more damage. Damage, damage, defense, damage, defense, defense and damage, defense and damage. It's all just passive effects that increase your defense and damage. I'm not going to go too much into it, but you can read into these effects should you want to do that. Now, the enhancement tree is really where this character kind of all comes together. Starting off, you don't really put any points into the Gnome tree because there's a lot of like intelligence and other abilities that you don't technically need. You already have the ability for the Dragon Mark, so you kind of just leave this alone, and instead spend all your points in Nature's Protector, Nature's Warrior, and Season's Herald. Nature's Protector is, of course, the Bear tree, giving you all of your defense and also damage. Nature's Warrior, more defense and damage. This is technically the Wolf tree, and this is technically the Bear tree, but a lot of their abilities kind of work with both animal forms. It just depends on which one you want to specialize in, which is why we get the top tier ability here, and the top tier abilities up here for Bear, as opposed to all the special Wolf abilities down here. Now, the couple things I want to key into is, first, you've got the rage effects. Bears are designed to rage. So you get angry and you're like, rah, and you want to kill people. But you can't cast spells while raging. However, you are able to cast spells while raging once you get Beast Awaken. This is one of the reasons why I don't really recommend, even if you take some of the raging stuff earlier, I wouldn't recommend using it that much until you get this ability, Beast Awaken, which lets you cast spells while raging, which means you can easily heal yourself and others while you play, and take some of the other stuff in the Bear tree first, before you actually end up using your rage a whole lot. So, take some of the Bloody Claws effects and some of these defensive stances and effects before you actually take or use a lot of the rages. You will have to take these points to go up in the tree, but like I said, once you get this, then you can just rage all the time and fight people as much as you want. Additionally, there's this Savage Roar ability. A lot of people are unfamiliar with how this works, even longtime DDO players. And basically what it does is Druids get a spell called Roar, which gives them more aggro, so it makes it so monsters are more likely to attack them. But this upgrade makes it so that when you use your spells Maul and Shred, which are bear attacks, you just claw people and do extra damage, and you want to press those anyway because they have special animations, and like the Maul can stun people and the Shred does bleeding damage. So you want to use these attacks already, but you get this buff called Killer Instinct, which makes you do more damage. However, if you have this buff on you, it makes it so that when you cast Roar, you let out this sonic blast that just demolishes everything. It might sound confusing, but I promise you, once you try to do it, you get started with it, you will, maybe not understand it the first time you try to cast it, but then once you actually see it go off, you've got that 3 stacks from using Maul and Shred, and you hit this button, it's going to clear the room, and you'll get addicted to it right away. You'll fall in love. Now, we put points on the Nature's Warrior tree just because you get a lot of extra offense out of the tree, a ton of damage, as well as the critical threat multiplier on here, so you do more damage when you critically hit people. You have this Nature's Warrior's Flight effect, which gives you the ability to get 20% dodge, and dodge is a really good defensive bonus, and extra buffs while raging, and this effect, which makes it so when you hit monsters, you actually get spell points back, so you can keep casting your spells, which is really cool. And then, of course, we have the last effect here. This is the Druid Caster tree. You don't care too much about this, but you get this Beguile effect, which makes this when you attack monsters, they just slow down. It means that in longer fights with more difficult bosses and enemies, it actually slows them down and reduces their damage, making it so you're much easy to stand against them. So keep that in mind. It's a very powerful effect. So that's the general tree here. As far as the spells go, Druids get a lot of spells, and you've got too many to even kind of account for here. The whole spell list is going to be below. I tried to distill out the best use case spells of each individual list to make sure that all of the best spells are here versus some of the not quite as good spells, but pretty much everything in here is either a defensive buff or offensive buff that gives you either more defense, like jumping or resisting energy damage, or offensive buffs like Ram Smite, which just gives you more strength and damage. There's special bear buffs like Rising Fury, which makes it so when monsters attack you, you gain strength and constitution, so you gain more health and more damage. And then all of the different bear attacks. Your Maul, your Great Maul, your Roar, your Shred, your Relentless Onslaught, Tremor. Tremor's awesome because you just slam the ground and literally knock people over. It's really cool, and you can gradually get into and learn all these things, but my recommendation was basically, when you get to the level where you unlock third level spells, feel free to read through the whole spell list, but these would be the ones I would recommend, so take your time to read through them. Druids as casters can be complicated, but it's not too bad. And then once you move into epics, my recommendation for you, once you hit level 20, which this character is going to just sail to 20, don't worry about that. You're going to be using Fury of the Wild as your main tree. Fury of the Wild is like a primal tree all about getting angry and smashing people, which is exactly what you want to do as a bear form. However, it has a couple other tricks up its sleeve. It also gets party buffs in terms of Primal Scream, where it buffs yourself and other people for more strength and more constitution, making everyone a lot stronger, both in damage and in extra hit points. And this tree gives you a ton of bulk and tankiness, giving you extra hit points and a percentage bonus to your hit points. On top of that, it also makes it so you get the effects so that when you go unconscious, which is when your health goes below 0, you don't actually die, you're just unconscious and you can be resurrected. Your character is able to go to very deep into the unconsciousness, so you can have multiple, like minus 200, and you're still alive, you're just unconscious. And the mantle effect here, it's basically a buff that when you put it on yourself, you are constantly healing, so you'll always get back up. Just like Chumbawamba, you might get knocked down, but you will get back up again. And then some of the other trees here are just for good utility. Legendary Dreadnought gives you health, defense, damage, and beefs up your tactical skills so you can stun more often. And same thing with Grandmaster Flowers, it just lets you stun more often. And that's the general idea behind Bear Druid. So if you're interested, give Bear Druid a shot today. It's going to be free to play as far as when this video is posted or maybe shortly after. So you'll be able to see this and give this a shot. Gnome Bear Druid might not seem good on the surface, but trust me, it is a beast. I've personally used it to play through the Hardcore League, where you have to play through without dying even a single time, doing pretty much every quest, and it was a complete cakewalk, so I highly, highly recommend it. Now, Warlock is one of my favorite classes in the game, and is in fact the class of my main character that I love playing. Warlock is a magic caster, able to cast different types of magical spells, as well as use the ability Eldritch Blast. In Dungeons & Dragons Online, every single spellcaster has to cast spells using their spell points until they run out, at which point they're in a bit of a bind. But not the Warlock. Cantrips are not officially in Dungeons & Dragons Online, however Warlock gets a special ability, the Eldritch Blast, which allows them to turn their magical damage into a potent and limitless source of ranged magical damage, as the Eldritch Blast feature does not cost any spell points. Since this is the case, and they can even change their Eldritch Blast shape into either an aura, if they want to protect themselves and their allies, or they just want to shoot out cones or chains, this character can pretty much weather any storm, especially since Warlocks also get a huge amount of Use Magic Device, which lets them get access to strong healing spells and other defensive magics that other classes might not be able to get access to. The character build in question I have set up for you is an abridged version of my main character, specifically focusing on Eldritch Blasting and destroying people with fire. Something that I think most Warlocks can get behind. I mean, hey, you gotta sell your soul, but then fire powers. It's pretty worth it to me. I can verify that this character build does work because I use it on my main character. So if you're interested in playing as a Tiefling Warlock, all fire, all power, please give this build a shot and check it out right here. Blasting foes in Hellfire, now that's what I want to do. Tiefling Warlock. Well, your ancestors already sacrificed their soul and turned you into a sort of half-demon thing, so why not give up a little bit of yours for some demonic power? Tiefling Warlock is an amazingly good solo class and a group class, able to just demolish foes in groups with lots of area of effect damage, and having a lot of Use Magic Device and other abilities to let them heal and do other different utilities as well, and having cool spells to boot. Now, Warlocks are a charisma class. You're going to be focusing on your charisma with a little bit of constitution. Everything else doesn't really matter that much. You don't hit people with attacks. You don't really let monsters get close to you anyway, so you don't need to worry about your defense so much, and a lot of that comes on the back end anyway. As far as your skill points, bluff, because, hey, if I'm, Making pacts with demons, I probably need to lie to people about that, so that's important. Spellcraft increases your spell damage, and use magic device, as I mentioned, is for allowing you to use other class abilities like healing, because warlocks have no healing abilities on their own. But with use magic device, well, guess what? I am a cleric now, because I'm just going to pick up a wand and pretend I'm a cleric or other characters. Now, as far as what feats your character is going to take, this is the one part where it gets kind of confusing. So warlocks and their Eldritch Blast focus on evocation damage. So it's even said, or evocation spell focus. So it says this damage is halved based on a successful fortitude save, and it is based on your evocation. So you want as much evocation bonus as possible, which is why we take spell focus evocation. You also have metamagic effects, which allow you to increase the effect of your spells and make them cost more. The problem is Warlock Eldritch Blast, and I'm going to link it in the description of, I said earlier, but I'm going to link in the description a video that kind of explains all the details about how Warlock works and doesn't work. Eldritch Blast is a spell, sort of, but it is not a spell in other ways. It scales off of spell effects, but it's not technically a spell, so you can't actually use a metamagic effect with it. But I actually recommend Maximize, Quicken, and Empower, and Embolden, and Intensify, and all these metamagic effects. And the reason why is because warlocks get a lot of spell-like abilities, and these spell-like abilities count as spells, which means they can take all these metamagic abilities, but they're not actually spells, which means they don't cost any more spell points. So you would say, okay, well, I have 500 spell points, and this costs 25, and this costs 10, and this costs 15, and this costs 10, and this costs 15. My spells are going to cost like 100 each, which would be true, but you're just putting onto a spell-like ability, so it costs nothing, which is fantastic. Warlocks are like cheaters. Their spell attacks, when they're Eldritch Blast and they blast people, doesn't cost anything, and they can metamagic all of their abilities at no cost. That's what you get for making deals with the devil, and you should be very happy about this. A lot of these other abilities are from taking the Fiend Pact, of course, which is what we're focusing on, being a Tiefling Fiend-like Warlock. So they're just going to fill in as you level up. You don't have to make decisions here. As you continue to go, you're also going to pick up things that increase your Eldritch Blast, and a big buff called Wellspring of Power, which gives you a whole bunch of damage when you need to attack people at the right moment. You just kind of like charge up and then start blasting even more powerful Eldritch Blasts out at people. Now, when it comes to the actual enhancements on your character is going to focus in a very kind of weird way. Now, where you're going to see a lot of character builds, usually they would kind of put all their points in, and they would take this big capstone ability here and this big tier 5 ability. It's important to note that these things are exclusive. Each character can only go to the top of one tree. So if I go to the top of this tree, I can't go to the top of another. The top of the tree abilities, called the tier 5s, are so powerful that your characters are only really able to have one. The game just doesn't let you take others. You have the points for it, but the game says no, because they're meant to be like iconic for your character. Similarly, the capstone ability requires you to be a pure class and to invest all your points into it. And as a result, they're almost always just bonkers strong and give you really unique abilities. Warlock is one of the few classes where you want to take some tier 5s in one tree, but you want to take the capstone in another. And so that's what we're talking about here with this tree. Warlocks excel at dealing damage to monsters very quickly and as much of a opportunity as they can by just constantly blasting out damage on people. But the problem is that this character focusing on damage has this Devour the Soul effect out of the Soul Eater tree, which is really cool, but is not going to help you as much with the damage. But at the top of the Soul Eater tree, we get all this damage effects. Eldritch Wave, this big triple blast spell-like ability that I was just talking about that does 1,000,000 billion damage. Extra spell critical chance, which is really good. This Supreme Hunger, which makes your other spell-like abilities deal a ton of damage. So it's great. And then this Tainted Scholar tree, which has this capstone, which is like more Eldritch Blast damage, more spell critical damage. It's called Heretical Lore because, yes, I have focused in all my heresy in one place. I am totally against the church because I'm filled with hellfire, and I'm going to show everybody how much hellfire it is. But the top of the tree is like spell strength, which is like okay, but it's not necessarily what you need. Confusion, which is like cool, but not what you need. Eldritch Ball, which is cool, but it's worse than the wave. And then a little bit of damage, which is not as good as this other damage here. So we end up splitting up the points. The basic way you want to progress through this tree is you want to come into the Tainted Scholar tree, and you want to get Chain Effect right away as fast as you can to help you progress. It's really important. And you also want to pick up these Strong Pact effects. These are the most important things. Strong Pact and then the Chain. The general progression, and you'll see that if you watch the video on Warlock and how to play, is I would come in here into this tree, spend pretty much all my points, grab the Strong Pact, grab the Strong Pact, grab the Chain, and then somewhere around level 6 or 7, I would change it out so I've got 12 points spent in this tree, grabbing this, this, and this, because this requires 10 points to get up to, and this costs 2. So I would spend whatever I can to make sure I have these 3 points and this one for 12 points spent. And then another 12 points spent to grab the Cone. Cone is the best Eldritch shape in my opinion, as it just blasts everything in front of you, and you feel like you're some type of just destructive god blowing up everything in front of you, and the Eldritch Pact damage is really, really good. So once you're around level 6 or 7, you put your points in here, you put your points into Cone, and then you can spend them wherever you want, just following and filling in these trees however you feel. The way that I would personally do it is finish up everything in Soul Eater, and then head back into Tainted Scholar and finish up everything in here from that point. You have some points left over, so I said, hey, Tieflings are cool, and they get Hellish Rebuke. It's a very fun pen and paper spell, and it works in DDO, so if you're interested, just throw in Hellish Rebuke, and you get this Cloak of Flame that does damage when monsters attack you, which, if you've ever played a Warlock in pen and paper, Hellish Rebuke is an awesome spell when the Dungeon Master thinks they're about to finish off the Warlock, and you're like, nope, I'm about to finish you off. Boom, and you turn an enemy that attacked you to dust. Very, very fun. Now, Warlocks do get spells. However, unlike their pen and paper counterparts, instead of getting like a lot of spells per day, or like only getting 2 spells, but they can get them back on their short rest and other things, the way that they work here is they have their different spell levels, but they also get a lot of free spells. So each pact gets a series of spells. So as a Fiend Pact, you get Command, Rage, Fire Shield, Binding Chain, Power Word, Blind, and Howl of Terror. In terms of actual notable good ones are Rage, Fire Shield, and Howl of Terror. And then from being a Tainted Scholar, you also get extra spells. Feather Falling, Web, Crushing Despair, Death Ward, Greater Heroism, and Energy Drain. All of these are good, so they're just fantastic, and you get them added onto your list, and you just spend some mana. And then Warlocks get to pick 2 additional spells for each level that they can just use themselves. I have all of the best defensive and utility spells, with the only really big offensive spell being Evard's Black Tentacles, which is kind of crazy. Once you get this spell, just cast it all the time. It's pretty much the best spell in DDO, I think, arguably one of the best spells in the entire game, so you want to use this. Also, Wail the Banshee's a placeholder here. There's supposed to be a new spell going here called Arcane Tempest. It's just not in this builder, but it will be in the written version of the guide, should you follow it. And then last but not least, if you make it to Epics, which you should, because Warlock is going to scream through heroic leveling all the way up to level 20 and break into the Epic paradigm, this is how I would set up my Epic Destiny tree. Exalted Angel, Sharadi Champion, and Draconic Incarnation. Now, there's a lot of irony when it comes to a demonic Warlock playing as an Exalted Angel. It is very, very funny, but it gets even more funny when you think about how powerful it is. You see, one of the effects you get out of the Warlock tree is called the Utter Dark Blast, and it makes it so that your base damage from your Eldritch Blast does evil instead of force. Evil damage is affected by alignment spell power, which is the same thing as light spell power. So you get items that give you radiance, which then gives you alignment spell power, which then gives you evil spell power. And this is important because these effects do chaos damage, which is alignment. This does evil, which is alignment. And your base damage from your pact is fire. So your Warlock only needs fire spell power and light spell power, the only 2 things that you actually need. Well, isn't it so convenient that the only epic tree in the entire game that is fire and light oriented is the angelic one? Burn in holy fire? Well, time for some demonic holy fire. And it makes your character way, way, way stronger, especially once you get Holy Fireball, which is bananas. To go along with this, however, Warlocks really benefit from using Sharadi Champion for this Prism effect, which basically gives them extra damage on every spell that they cast. Every spellcaster can make use of this, but Warlocks, because of their actual casting speed, because every time you just Eldritch Blast constantly like this, you're like boom, 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 you're always applying these effects, and the damage is insane. Never skip Sharadi Champion. You might decide to do anything else you want. This should be always a staple right here. 8 points here. This is the first thing you take every time you hit level 20. You put this in, you put this exact setup that I have right here, you'll be so happy with yourself, you're going to be blowing up the world. And lastly, I like to take the Dragon Breath from Draconic Incarnation, because I just think it's good. Dragon Breath is awesome, it does a bunch of damage, you have a million meta magic feats, and so it's just nice when you have a bunch of monsters in front of you, you just breathe out some fiery Dragon Breath, because you're a demon, and demons have fire breath, so why not? So that's Warlock. You'll have a great time. It's one of my favorite characters, and my main character actually uses this build literally every day. So I love this. I've been playing it for God, like 6 months now, and I haven't gotten tired yet. I use it for raiding. I use it for extremely high difficulty content. This is a fantastic character build, and I can't wait for you to sink your teeth in and give it a shot as Tiefling Warlock. Last but not least, we have Monk. Now, Monk is a bit of a more complicated class than some of the other classes in this list, as not only do you have to manage your melee attacks and your spacing, but monks get special moves which scale off of ki, a resource that is increased whenever you strike monsters. You generate ki when you attack monsters, and then you spend it on your special abilities. And there are many different ways to play as a monk. You can play as a fist monk, a two-weapon fighter monk, a staff monk. Heck, you can even throw shurikens. But for the purposes of this character build, I went with Staff Monk, since Staff is a very fun and smooth playstyle. Extremely good area of effect damage, while also getting some crowd control. This character is able to keep itself alive and actually have fantastic healing powers for its allies, while dishing out gigantic amounts of damage that continues to scale deep into the endgame. Staff Monk is also a powerhouse when it comes to leveling, since monks excel at two things when they play as a staff character: movement speed and area of effect damage, the things that you need to clear rooms and go into new rooms to clear more rooms. Staff Monk also benefits from being a combination of both an easier monk to play than Fist Monk, and right now, a stronger monk due to the current way the balance has shifted. I'm sure that someday in the future there may be some buffs to Fist Monk and to hand wraps in general, but for now, Staff is the way to go when you want to pick your monk. And I tell you what, combining it with the Wood Elf, maxing out on that dexterity, and basically being the Shaolin monk flying across the room, doing dexterous flourishes and strikes, you can't really go wrong with Staff Monk right now. So if you want to dance on the clouds and bring down a staff with the force of a falling tree on your foes, pick up Wood Elven Monk right here, right now. Now look, I get it. Moving out to a monastery on a mountain and becoming a Shaolin monk is a lot of work. But don't worry, in video games, being a monk is very easy. And what better monk to be than an elven monk, one who can dedicate their entire eternal life to focusing and finding enlightenment. Now, the Wood Elf monk is a great starter for a type of monk character, giving you dexterity to be nimble around the battlefield and focusing largely on quarterstaff fighting. You can also go unarmed if you want with a character like this. However, that is not the build I am suggesting, as you would need to make quite a few changes, and for me personally, I think quarterstaff is a better tool. Think about it like this. It's probably better to fight with a weapon than without a weapon if you're a beginner in martial arts, because the weapon is going to help you kind of do a little bit more damage than just with your fist. So that's what we're going to be doing here, focusing on that, and then maybe you can graduate the monk school into the hand wrap fighting style, but for now, two-handed fighting. You need strength for two-handed fighting with your quarterstaff. You need dexterity because you're a monk. You need constitution because dying is bad. And you need wisdom because you're a monk and it scales their monk abilities. We also put a little bit of strength in early so you can take some more of the two-handed fighting feats. And then the rest of it goes into dexterity to beef up your defenses and your offense as well. As far as the skills, it's important to note your character's kind of dumb. You have a 6 intelligence. That means your character's like very not smart, and you don't have a lot of skills. But concentration is very, very important for monks. It's their most important skill because it determines their ability to focus and have ki. And you need Use Magic Device because you need to be able to use different items and effects to either heal yourself, resurrect allies, or protect yourself from different magical effects. Also, we put a point in tumble, which allows you to tumble, and there's one after for point, so it goes into jump. How neat is that? Now, when we move into the later game, or not the later game, the leveling process, monks get a lot of bonus feats, and it can be difficult to determine what you should be taking, which is why this is here to tell you that you want to take two-handed fighting, and you want to take some of these dodge effects, but anything that focuses on staff fighting is kind of the main focus here. So two-handed fighting for all your staff, this effect called Swords to Plowshares, which makes your quarterstaffs very, very strong. Spring attack, which allows you to jump around in combat. It's actually like an active dash, which is very, very fun once you start getting used to it. It's also important to note that if this is your first character in DDO, Monk is the fastest character in the game in terms of just base movement speed, and then with Spring Attack and later Abundant Step, allowing you to dash everywhere, it is very difficult to go back to the real world of everyone else who has to just slowly like trudge around the entire world, left foot, right foot, whereas a monk, you're just flying through the trees like a leaf in the wind. So just keep that in mind. It may poison your perception of at movement speed once you play a monk, but that's okay, because you can just play a monk forever, and it's a good class. Now, one of the things you get to do as a monk is at level 3 you get to choose your path, the path of darkness or the path of light. I have both of them set here, and the reason is because you need both of them. The Henshin Mystic Monk, which is the type of monk that a staff monk is, uses the opposite effect. So if you're a light monk, you get a set of darkness attacks because they're about balance. If you are a dark monk, you get a series of light attacks because they're about balance. The light attacks are all about healing, and the dark attacks are all about damage. Now, during the leveling process, the light attacks are much more important because monks don't have a good way to heal, but Fist of Light here is very good. So at level 3, you want to take Fist of Light because it's very powerful. However, once you get to level 12, monk, or a Henshin Mystic Monk at least, unlocks their big balance attacks, and you want the opposite. So while you would normally take the light attack, the big dark attack you would get from the Henshin Mystic is actually a giant damage effect, which is cool, but not as good as the opposite effect, which is a big heal. So you take this at level 3, get your healing, you take Fists of Light so that way you're able to heal yourself, but then once you get to 12, you want to swap this into the Fists of Darkness effect, and then you can take the light effect from Henshin Mystic. I'll show that in a little bit if that sounds confusing. There'll be a visual later, so if you can always just click on the description and go to the actual visual build guide where you can see where the swap is going to take place. And there's an NPC in town that does the swap for you. Outside of that, you're going to grab all your combat style feats, and then as you move into epics, just damage, 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 defense, 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 defense. You pick up some of the damage stuff first, which helps you level, and then as you get towards the end game, you clear out some of that extra defense on your character to make yourself a little bit tankier, a little bit hardier. As far as the enhancement tree goes, this character focuses on the Henshin Mystic tree with a little bit of a focus in Ninja Spy, Shintao, and even some of the Wood Elf specialization here. Now, the Henshin Mystic tree, the specific thing I was talking about is this attack right here. Shadows cannot exist without light. This is exceedingly powerful. What it does is that whenever you attack with this, it heals you and all of your friends for 100 hit points. However, monks with two-handed weapons have an effect called Strike Through, which allows their quarterstaff to hit multiple targets whenever you attack. With this character, you hit 3 targets every single time you attack with your weapon, which means this hits 3 times. So this heals you and all your allies for 100 3 times. That's really, really, really good. So, as I'm sure you can understand, because it affects you and your friends on a 6-second cooldown, you're just going boom, boom, pumping out AoE healing like a machine, which is one of the reasons why you want to have this, and you need to be a Dark Monk. But leveling up a Dark Monk is very painful, so I would recommend start with the Fist of Light, and then at 12, when you get this ability, you want to swap over to that Dark Monk, so you can get this. Outside of that, the Henshin Mystic is all about dealing damage quickly with some special moves. You get these cool combo spells. I am sad to say, almost all of them are bad. The Key Bolt is bad. The Incinerating Wave is bad. But you get this Cauldron of Flame where you launch down a cauldron at your feet, and all of a sudden fire is in a ring around you, and as long as you stay inside of it, your character is going to be doing absolutely massive damage. Highly recommend using this ability. Fantastic ability. Big, big, big fan. However, as we move up the tree, you get other attacks, increasing your double strike, which is just a more damage stat, gives you a chance to hit twice. Another big attack, Fist of Iron, and my favorite, Void Strike, which says, on a Vorpal, which is when you roll a natural 20 on your dice roll, your enemy is erased from existence, which is an instant kill. Gotta love it. So very, very cool here. Out of the Ninja Spy tree, this is where you actually want to go kind of first. So one of the first things you want to take is the basic training effect and the advanced ninja training. Once you get these 2 points, which is 6 points in being level 3, that's when you want to go into Henshin Mystic. But these let you get dexterity to hit and damage with your quarterstaff, which is of course very important because you're a dexterity build, you're focusing on dexterity, all your stats are going to be dexterity. So you want to make sure you're taking this sooner rather than later. And then the Wood Elf tree allows you to pick up some more accuracy, so your character has a very high hit chance, and more defenses while you're not wearing armor. On top of that, you also get Shintao, which gives you defenses while you're not wearing armor. So this character is actually very, very tanky and deals a lot of damage. The only thing this is missing is some crowd control. During the leveling process, you won't have a lot of crowd control, so you basically just got to manage your spacing, kind of move around targets, and make sure you're using your healing effects on yourself whenever you can, such as your Fist of Light and your Shadows cannot exist without light, and kind of outlast your opponents with superior mobility and damage. But all of this changes once you move into Epics, because once you get into Epics, your character becomes a Grandmaster of Flowers, giving you access to the Drifting Lotus attack, which becomes a massive AoE stun. Now, the thing is, this attack does a crazy high amount of damage. So AoE stun is nice. Usually this is an AoE kill everybody in the room. But if they're alive, they have to deal with the stun that you're going to apply on them as well, and that can be pretty devastating. But monks get even cooler. If you make your way all the way to the top, to the pinnacle level of 30, your character is going to get Everything is Nothing, where your state of luminous consciousness allows your will to alter the fabric of the planes, ripping your foes out of time and space, where basically everyone around you dies. It's very cool. You just tear them from the multiverse. What a fun idea. So Everything is Nothing, awesome. Or Split the Soul, which because you're a dark monk, it makes a Shadow Warrior copy of you that allows you to hit everybody that's around you, even though you already hit 3 targets. Now you can hit double that. And on top of that, your character's also going to be just banishing people from the multiverse all the time. There's a 10% chance. It's very, very cool. Monks become really neat, especially once they get higher level and use some really crazy stuff. And it's all about that serenity, man. You know what? I'm focusing on enlightenment. I'm focusing on serene thoughts and my divine will, and also erasing people from existence because maybe they needed to be purged. I don't know. And then on the back half, picking up some defense from Unyielding Sentinel, getting some defense here, and some defense from Legendary Dreadnought. Overall, Monk is kind of hard to play, and this character is not going to be the easiest to learn, but once you get started, Monk is something that pretty much everybody, that if they make it past the first hurdles of managing their ki and losing all their abilities and trying to figure out where they go on their action bar, they fall in love and generally stick as Monk players, and you might find yourself in that boat with the Monk, as it's really, really fun to play. Now, this was the last character on here, but don't worry, there's tons of different characters and options you can try if you've never played Dungeons & Dragons Online, or if you're looking for some more involved and invested things, which is why in the link below will be a link to my full build repository where every build I've ever posted is, as I post tons of Dungeons & Dragons Online character builds all the time for every single different situation that you might need them in. But that's all I have for you today, so thank you for watching. I appreciate everyone who tuned in. If you like what you saw, subscribe, and if you don't like what you saw, don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear my emotions are fragile and I'm hanging by a thread. So thank you for watching. Have a great day. Goodbye.